they can be established. They help protect the ground over the winter. They add diversity to the system, which in turn helps foster diverse microbial communities. They can be used for grazing. So in Wisconsin systems, if we're cutting this off for silage, potentially these cover crops could get some more growth, and then be grazed later in the fall or even in the spring. There's some dairy farmers. We had a field day up in Black River Falls a few weeks ago, and a dairy farmer there was planting rye in the fall, and that was actually the first crops that he was grazing in the spring. So there's lots of different ways that you can incorporate cover crops. There's a lot of different reasons why you want to incorporate cover crops. And the challenge we've had, and Leah Varek, who was my research scientist for many years, told me she would never do a cover crop experiment again because there were always failures. And the way we were approaching interseeding was you're really looking at research from the East Coast. Like Penn State has done a lot of interseeding research in conventional systems and in organic systems. And what they were finding was working in their system as if they planted the cover crops around the V4, V5 stage. So a little bit later, when the corn kind of reaches just past that critical weed-free period, and right before canopy closure, that was working for them. They developed interseeding equipment not dissimilar to what we see there, and in those systems on the East Coast, that seemed to be working. As we tried to move those recommendations out to the upper Midwest, though, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, what we were finding was that, honestly, I think our systems grow too good of a corn crop, and we were getting too much shading. We can't have a completely shaded environment. We know as organic growers that shading inhibits weed seeds from growing. So it can be a good thing that we grow such good corn and get that good shading. We want that dense canopy cover. We want that high plant populations. But when it comes to establishing cover crops, that's a challenge. So we started to, in part, because of some conversations we were having with conventional growers through some efforts to develop an on-farm research network that is being coordinated by Ann Pfeiffer. And Ann is also interested in doing this same work with organic farmers. So if you're interested in on-farm research, I encourage you to talk to Ann, because we're really looking at hopefully getting groups of organic farmers together to do more on-farm research. Very much inspired by the incredible work we see in Iowa with Practical Farmers of Iowa. But Ann and I, as we're talking to conventional farmers, one of the things that we were hearing that they were doing that was working was planting earlier. So going in more when the corn was at like the V1, V3 stage, so much earlier than what we had been recommending. At that point, they were actually seeing that cover crop established. So by the time the canopy closed, the cover crop had a decent root system. They were able to get up and going. They still kind of went dormant in the summer, but it was enough to get a jump on growth before canopy closed that when the corn was harvested, that cover crop would persist. Jason Cavadini from the Marshfield station, I've heard him in talks, call this the vanishing cover crop syndrome. If you interseed later, and then the cover crop, you think, oh, it looks good, but then you go back in August and it's not there. So we were thinking, well, how do we do this in organic? Is this an option? Another one of the reasons we were going in around V4, V5 was because that really, because it was just before canopy closure, it was synchronized with the last cultivation. So what we were doing is we were doing a last row cultivation. Typically in all organic corn here, we do a couple of tine weedings, a couple of rotary hoeings, and then a couple passes with the row cultivator. So we're going out there like 5 or 6 times with different pieces of cultivation equipment. But what we decided to try here, and you can walk in here and take a look at this, is to basically skip that last row cultivation. So we planted around V3, but really what we focused our weed management on was tine weeding and rotary hoeing. And Ben, who's my current research technician, this is his first year as an organic farmer, and is doing just an absolutely phenomenal job. Did we rotary hoe over the cover crops? We didn't. Okay, so we really were limiting our cultivation passes, and then hoping that the cover crops would help with some of that weed suppression. And Ann and Ben, you'll have to remind me. So there's a couple different cover crops in here. There's annual ryegrass and clover, I believe, and I think Ben has a handout. So you see limited cultivation passes here, and the earlier interseeding with that piece of equipment. So it's basically planting 2 rows of cover crops in here, and there's more details in the handout about the seeding rates. And to me, it looks like it did establish better. There's definitely cover crop in there, but you're welcome to walk in there for a bit. There's definitely weeds in there too. It's always a little deceiving when you look at the edges here because there's more sunlight coming in, the weeds are going to be bigger and more mature. Honestly, the way that I think about this, and I'm definitely open to discussion and debate, but if they're mostly annual broadleaf weeds that are in there and they're not going to seed, I kind of think of them as just another cover crop because it's helping deplete the weed seed bank, adding more diversity, and as long as those annual weeds aren't going to seed, it's not going to become a problem in the next years. To me, the corn looks really good. Planting at this seeding rate of the cover crop, at least with what took, with the level of weed pressure here, it doesn't look like it's hurt the corn yield. This is our first year doing this, so I can't report back the corn yields to you, but we'll definitely be reporting back at various programming and listserv and Facebook page. But feel free to take a look in there, walk through there a little bit. But I think, if anyone wants to, again, for on-farm research, try this on their farm next year. With on-farm research, we always recommend doing a smaller acres because it is research. We try to take the risk off of you guys by doing it here, but it is always so valuable to collect more data on more sites and see how this is working on other farms. Ben or Ann, do you have any more comments?
I guess just that in these 6 rows right behind me is the annual ryegrass and a clover, and then the next block to my left, your right, is the mix that is clover, tillage radish, and cowpea. And Aaron's right, if you walk in, it doesn't look quite as seedy as it is right
Yeah,
there.
please feel free to take a look, walk in there. You're not going to hurt the experiment by walking in there, but it doesn't, the ryegrass looks quite beautiful in here. Wisconsin, at least what we've experienced, I'm a little cautious when talking about annual ryegrass in organic systems because I know some places it can overwinter. It can become a weed in organic systems. We've always seen it winter kill here at this site, so I feel comfortable using it as a cover crop here, although it will not overwinter.